Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be discussing cognitive functions with Denzel, also known as Deezy. How you doing, Deezy?
I'm doing all right, man. How about you?
Oh, I am sort of out of breath because I've just sorted out the bedroom to do our live stream from today
Yeah.
because my beloved fiance is cooking a wonderful meal of enchiladas.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
beautiful. Wonderful is a great word to use for your fiance's cooking.
indeed, indeed. How have you been? How's your day been today?
Today's been pretty good. I had a session with Heidi Prieb,
Mm.
about tri-type and kind of like in a way like diving into that,
Mhm,
when what mine may be and everything. That was
mhm,
our first session doing it, and that was pretty cool. It took like almost, I think, either 2 or 3 hours. I kind of lost track of
mhm.
time. And then today's Halloween. So for work, we're supposed to be
Mm.
dressing up. We're not supposed to be, but they're giving us permission to dress up. And I tried to go to the store right before coming back, so that's why I was a little bit late. But I was trying to go and get a Miles Morales, the Black Spider-Man costume.
Oh,
Couldn't
very
find
good.
one. Yeah, yeah. I thought that would be like a really good idea to wear to work, but I couldn't find one, so I was just like, nah. So I might just like throw on like a Superman shirt or something that I already have. I don't know.
Hey, it's way better than my Halloween costume. I spent £1.20 on my Halloween costume.
Oh, and what was that?
Yeah, so I just was really lazy. So I thought I'd just be a werewolf
A
in the
werewolf
process of transformation.
in the process of
Yes,
transformation.
let me show you what I mean. Hang on a second.
Yeah.
Let me demonstrate. Where's my glove? Hang on. Yeah, so
Oh wow.
this is the idea. I thought I would just get a glove.
Okay. So that's your Halloween costume for today.
That is my Halloween costume. I am
Hey.
in the process of transforming.
Well, I think that's very creative.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think it's very lazy. But anyway,
It depends on how you look at it. It was also
yeah,
affordable, so it works out.
true. Very true. Um, but yeah, so topic for today, cognitive functions. Um, so I've watched your video when you were running through the cognitive functions,
Mm,
and I was surprised because I thought that a lot of the definitions you gave were
mm,
pretty close to the socionics definitions.
mm.
And would you say that's because you've been absorbing certain socionics concepts, or did you reach that on your own?
I would say it was both.
Hmm.
Like the way that I've been operating, is, I guess I'm hesitant to say mixing the systems, but in a way, the way that I see it is like, okay, people are people.
Hmm.
If we're all going to be using the same terms, then we should observe. I work with Venn diagrams in my head. That's
Hmm.
just how I am. And so if MBTI, Myers-Briggs is saying this, and socionics is saying this, but they all derived from Jungian theory, then it's like, okay, I have to know what these three are.
Hmm.
Know what this is saying by itself, what's that saying by itself, what's that saying by itself, but then what are they all agreeing upon?
Hmm.
And that way, whenever I'm speaking any of the three dialects, then people can know exactly what I'm talking about, and I can know exactly what they're talking about. But then also at the same time, it's like, well, why did we have to, not actually saying that we shouldn't, but just purely why? Like, why did we
Yeah.
have to separate the dialect? So if you look at Spanish and I don't know, Polynesian, is it Polynesian? Not Polynesian. I think.
Micronesian?
What did you say?
Micronesian?
No. No. Oh, dang. The language just escaped me, but it's a different nuance of Spanish in a way. However, yeah.
Oh, you mean like a dialect?
Yeah, yeah.
Like Catalan?
I don't really remember.
That's probably a completely different language, Catalan.
Yeah.
Dialect.
But yeah, like if you look at the language of Spanish and then you look at the similar dialect it'll probably come back to me later on in the
or like German and Swiss German. That's a dialect.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, well, did we really have to pick a different way of saying the same word? And if we did, that's fine. I just want to know why. And so that's how I'm kind of like seeing Myers-Briggs and socionics. Like, okay, looking at introverted intuition, did we really have to say that, oh, well, socionics sees it this way while Myers-Briggs is seeing it this way? And if so, why? Because I believe that the functions all have different facets. And so like Myers-Briggs explains certain faces of a function. And then I would like to believe that socionics explains other faces of a function. So then when you kind of like put them together, you're seeing all of the faces of that function. Like, so for example, extroverted sensation in Myers-Briggs, just generally speaking, is most known as like getting into action and seeing things for what they are. But then socionics like associates it with like force. And so it's like, well, I think it could be both. Just because Myers-Briggs doesn't focus on the force part doesn't necessarily mean that it's false. Let's look at sensation users, extroverted sensing users. Hey, how do you relate to force? You know, and it's like, oh, I do kind of relate to that. Okay, well, Myers-Briggs didn't say that, but that clearly still is true for you. So therefore, let me add that to my repertoire whenever I'm talking about extroverted sensing. And so in the same sense, I guess that is kind of like mixing them. However, when there are two opposing or contradicting thoughts in the terminology, that's when it's like, okay, now I want to know, like, okay, so is there one that's actually inherently right? Or is it really just like a difference in the system or what it may be? So I'm still on that process and I'm still like, you know, like learning. But I can say that everything that I at least shared in my cognitive function videos, because I made some like 2 or 3 years ago when I first got into Myers-Briggs. And then now I made one because I've been doing a lot of life coaching and reading both socionics and Myers-Briggs content and Jungian content. Like I have a friend who's super into Jungian theory and we disagree on a lot of things originally. But then I started like seeing like, okay, like now I at least know how to speak your dialect. And now I understand. So like in her book, she's now come around to like believing that I'm an ENFJ as well. But at first she was saying like, well, you know, because the way that Jung specifically defined dysfunction is like this and like that. And I don't know, I think that you're probably an ENTP. I wasn't offended. I'm just like, okay, well, you're coming from a different system. You know, it's like, okay, if this is how you're defining it because you're using different terminology and everything. Sure, I guess in your system, I would be an ENTP. But then she would come around like, okay, no, actually, I see now like you're an ENFJ. And I ended up like agreeing with her definition of Jung's original introvert intuition theory. She had disagreed with mine at first, but then when we talked more, she was like, oh, so what you're saying pretty much is that I'm not necessarily wrong, but you're explaining like the inner workings of what maybe Jung was unable to explain. I was like, yeah, and this is just like another facet of that same function. So it's not necessarily saying that the type does not, like that Jung was wrong. It's just a different facet. So that's kind of like how I've been seeing it. And I'm not saying that that's exactly how it's going to be the whole way through socionics, especially looking through the 8-function model and everything. But it's at least something that, at least for myself, that I want to explore, so that if I end up like deciding like, yes, these are just two separate systems, two separate dialects that should not be conflated, I know for myself why.
Okay.
That was a long answer, but yeah.
Good answer. I mean, what I would say to that about extroverted sensation, I think the reason why force is talked about is very much for similar reasons as focus on action. In sociology, we do talk about action as well, and that it is action taking that is something which you need strong extroverted sensation to reliably do, to be decisive in that moment. So yeah, I think there are bits there where MBTI and socionics have certainly overlapped. I think socionics, in going on to that, to say that this is the source of a more bossy forcefulness, the more assertiveness side. And I think what Myers-Briggs did was it detached the action-orientedness from to extroverted thinking. One thing, well, and I think this becomes quite clear, because although extroverted sensation in both theories, just taken on its own, they seem to go quite well together. And say you take extroverted sensation blocked with introverted thinking, suddenly it becomes a very different set of descriptions. If you take an ISTP in Myers-Briggs and you try to realize an LSI in socionics, they have very different descriptions. One being more of a tinkerer, more of a concrete problem solver. The other being far more of a laying down of their structure onto reality and taking on more tendencies in Myers-Briggs. And I think that's where it becomes more difficult, how socionics has realized the blockings of different elements together to create these molecules of information.
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
Blocking. And I think where they have experienced a phenomenon, which is the blocking of two elements together, at least in extroverted thinking, I think they may have simply said that's just a separate cognitive function entirely, rather than a combination of two things together.
And that's actually what I've been very fascinated with, coincidentally, even before I started looking into socionics, the way that functions operate together. So I think that that's also maybe like what had intrigued my view on Myers-Briggs. Like, even for example, I recently asked, well, not recently, like a few months ago, I asked Twitter, I was like, okay, how would you describe FI and NI working together versus FE and NI working together? And some people, not in like a bad way, but they almost kind of like made it seem like I was asking a dumb question. Like, well,
oh, it's a very good question.
Thank you. But yeah, it's like, well, I mean, clearly FI and NI would be like a loop. And so it's not like healthy to like, because there's no external feedback. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I get that, sure. But I mean, but it's like what would these two focus on together versus what would FE and NI be focusing on together? And then I kind of been like doing that. So in a way, like blocking with different functions and just seeing, because like my wife is an ISFP. And so I've been looking at her, and I've been like trying to, you know, like I'm always comparing our functions. Like we both share, from my definitions of SE and NI, different places in our stacking, but still share that. But we differ when it comes to FE, FI, TE, TI. And I totally see that in our dynamic, like all the time. And so I'm constantly like, and she speaks type extremely well, like pretty much just as well as I do. And so we sit down and we discuss these things like, okay, well, why do you see like this? Maybe this is an FE thing. And then we'll go to other people who we know as FE users or FI users, and we'll be like, hey, like, so with me and Jamila, with me and Denzel, like this is how we see things or whatever. How do you see that? Or how, and like we kind of like ask people around, whether they know about type or not, so that we can kind of like solidify like what is actually an individual thing and what is like a type thing. And so yeah, like that idea of like blocking, I think like I agree. I don't think that that's something that Myers-Briggs like necessarily like focuses on, but that's also why I've realized the danger in stating that I'm like into the Myers-Briggs system, because then people will assume that it's just gifts deferring that I've read. And
Yeah.
you know, and like those are the definitions that I'm going off of, when I would like to believe that my definitions of FE are way more nuanced than what was presented in gifts deferring, and you know, most different, like, because I've done the coaching and I've done research and I've talked to people of different things. So it's like, okay, I'm trying to collect as much nuance and facets of every function possible. And then not only that, but how do they look like when they're together? So yeah, that idea of blocking has been very fascinating to me.
I would say that, strictly speaking, you can only reblock two information elements where they're opposite in their vertness, so extrovert and introversion, and opposite in their quite easy to get a sense of a block together FI and NE, for instance, because that is good faith judgment. You can see the assessment of character traveling across possible context. Whereas when you take, say, FI and NI, what we call relations and time, that doesn't exactly block together. You can't exactly that thing as a whole. Instead, you see the judgments with thinking in terms of how relationship may work in the long run.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Someone saying, a cat saying that I'm still lagging and freezing video sound going out. That's not so good. Can you hear me all right, Denzel?
Yeah, you kind of like freeze for a moment every few seconds and then you come back. So I just try to piece together. I wasn't sure if that was from my end or your end.
Ah, it must be from my end. Let's see what I can do about it. My internet access is okay. This is the first time I'm trying out StreamYard, you see. Just trying to see if that works okay. We might have to press on, though, because I'm not sure how to fix the issue right now. Yeah, I may have to move into the living room, but I can't at the moment because Zara's cooking up some lovely enchiladas. Maybe I'll get a booster in here sometime so I can do, because I'm doing quite a few of them in here. Yeah. So also one cognitive function, which I think you are less aligned on with socionics, is introverted sensation. And I remember when you were doing your video, you end up talking quite a bit of extroverted intuition brings around, rather than the focus specifically on the introverted sensation. So the idea of just doing things because that's the way it's been done before. And the idea that there's an inherent motivation just towards repetition and tradition. And I know that is something which socionics doesn't have so much of an emphasis on. Instead, what they'd say is, when someone is sensation leading, going to be extrovert intuition suggestive. So they're not going to be confident about alternative possibilities, and they won't readily go out and explore those possibilities. So they may end up living more of a monotonous life in their comfort zone. But that doesn't necessarily mean they believe in tradition for the sake of tradition. And what it does in fact mean is that they like being opened up to new possibilities. And they're actually quite open-minded towards other people offering something new. They're just not sure how to pursue it.
Okay, I'm processing that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, you can continue. Yeah, I'm just.
Because of that, we actually don't think of ESFJs and ESTJs following this traditionalism really at all. They can be, wholesome, more down to earth, and do what other people are doing, but they're also very much interested in pursuing alternative ways of doing things, being more inclusive and new perspectives, and trying to, for the LSE, constantly learn and develop. And the ESE actually are very interested in different ideas and perspectives coming in this big feeling of whatever the truth is. They themselves don't know what the exact truth is. Not very good at setting up a structure, but they want to include everyone to have a say.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that is, I think, a difference then, because the way that, I mean, you've watched the video, the way that, like, in the Myers-Briggs terminology, if we're being honest, introverted sensation or introverted sensing is the function that I'm the least familiar with. Like, out of all 8 of them that I've been trying to, like, define and everything, that was the one that I had to spend the most time trying to relate to, because from a Myers-Briggs perspective, I would say that I worked so heavily on introverted intuition, or heavily through introverted intuition. Yeah, and so it's like every time I try to see things from an introverted sensing standpoint, it ends up like being clearly from the lens of an introverted intuitive user. And then I see this also with my introverted sensing friends, like those who I would type in ESFJ, which I now know is not always equal to ESE, but it's like me and ESFJs are very different. and they look at me weird. And so, and then I look at them weird, like my sister-in-law, and it's just like, yeah, we just don't, we keep on missing each other because of our internal process of NI versus SI. So SI has actually been the function that I've been struggling the hardest with to. Yeah. So I guess like that's a good perspective to now like try and not necessarily say like, okay, that's going to equal once again to ESE, but it's like, I wonder if maybe healthier ESFJs are like this. Like it's something, that's why like I'm processing it. I'm trying to like see like, is that true to my experience as well? Or is that really truly just a difference in the systems, like in how we view certain people?
Well, have you typed any people as ESFJ?
Oh yeah, several.
Okay. How about famous people we can both recognize?
Yeah, I have a list on my iPad that I usually keep. So let me try and refer to one that maybe we can both look at. Okay, well, one, have you ever watched the show Jane the Virgin?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Okay, then we won't go to that one. I'm trying to look for characters.
Oh, you can be fictional if you want. I got 53 celebrities here.
Yeah, I was thinking celebrities next, because celebrities, like with characters, we can for sure always go off of the same information. Like we're definitely looking at the same show, same interactions and all of that. And we're now saying like, okay, this is what I was seeing when I saw this specific interaction, versus with celebrities. You may have seen one interview, I may have seen another one. But that could definitely be like a second one. Okay, actually, Drake and Josh from the show. Have you seen that one?
Oh, Josh. I have. I wouldn't call him an ESC in socionics.
Okay.
No.
What would you call him?
The thing about Josh, right? One, he gets bullied very easily. 2, he's a SWAT. He's not charismatic. So, I mean, you think of an ESC and socionics, their two strongest things are going to be one, extroverted ethics, the ability, and blocked with introverted sensation, the ability to create positive moods around them and to shape that mood. And also, extroverted sensation should be the demonstrative. They should be very capable of handling themselves and being very assertive. So, what we're talking about, I think, on Twitter, extroverted sensation in a demonstrative function is where it is strong but not valued. Means that someone can use that whenever they need to. And it even comes out quite obviously in their activity, in their high levels of activity and restlessness. But they don't want to create an aggressive or pushy mood. ESCs want an inclusive mood where everyone comes together. So they can end up cajoling people into coming together, and even could even end up bringing people a little bit because the extrovert sensation runs away to create extrovert sensation as a valued thing in their environment. They want people to feel safe.
I see. So when it comes to ESFJs, so not necessarily maybe ESCs, but ESFJs who I think of Regina George then from Mean Girls. Would you consider her to be
Regina George? Let me take a look at Regina George. I think I've seen Mean Girls. I don't remember who this character is again.
Yeah, she's like the stereotypical archetype for you can't sit at our table kind of thing.
Yeah, that again would not be ESC in socionics.
That's so interesting.
That would be
unhealthy ESC.
Well, I wouldn't even say unhealthy ESC. That sounds to me like more unhealthy beta, if anything. It's exclusive belonging. It's not inclusive belonging.
Wow.
Because I think what is the difference? If FE has an element of belonging in it, right? Belonging to groups, right? Now, what decides whether that is inclusive, where anyone can join in, or exclusive, and only certain people can come into this group? What decides that? Well, in socionics, it will be SCNI or SINE. Because think about it, extrovert sensation is about applying some will onto one's surroundings, pushing certain things apart, saying, drawing a line in the sand, don't cross here. And introvert intuition is inherently about restricting the scope of possibility. Only a few who are on the same journey that have a certain special transcendent or special qualities should be on here. Beta groups, they tend to want some kind of audition for other people. They want to know that because for them, they want their belonging to be above in some way, more important, more special in some way. And it's not going to be more important or more special if anyone can join in. Whereas it's ESCs with alpha values far more horizontal than vertical values tending to be. And extrovert intuition wants as many possibilities as possible, as many inputs as possible. And SI wants to create a very positive, feel-good, harmonizing mood. So telling someone they can't belong would be horrible for an alpha. And often it's the alphas who get really angry when someone gets left out.
Wow. And just to make sure, and that's even like, so no matter the health of that individual, that value in socionics will always be inherent and will still stick.
There'll be better or worse ways of going about it, right? There's some really bad examples of beta, which we mentioned in our political history in the 20th century. But there are perfectly more anodyne examples where people just want to be, on the cheerleader squad because, you have to be especially good. You have to be beautiful to be on there, say, or good at cheering or being charismatic or popular, having those special qualities not everyone will have. Getting the top part in the school play and being in the actors clique, but not necessarily being in any particular clique. There are other betas who are unhappy because they're not in the clique they want to belong to. And so they'll try to set up their own clique or their own group of special belonging.
Right.
It's very harmful to a beta to not belong, to not be included in the group which they feel is exclusive and they want to have gained access to. It doesn't mean they believe in inclusivity for the sake of inclusivity. They just want to be part of that special belonging.
Got you. Would you say alphas are also prone to kick people out of the group if it's, I guess, like if the person, like what would be the difference between, so betas, they from my understanding want that exclusivity, but and that's how they kind of, that's their vetting process, I guess, for lack of better terms, to make sure like who can come in, who can't. Wow, with alphas, would it be right to assume that they welcome everyone, but then people are prone to being kicked out if they maybe like are disruptive in a manner?
There can be that. There'll be a degree of tolerance to that as well, depending on the type. Like a Nihile is going to be highly tolerant of it to some degree. But if they're making everyone else feel bad in the group and no one becomes fun, then alphas will more reluctantly ask someone to leave at some point. They won't like it. They won't like the confrontation, but you need some confrontation to preserve harmony in the group. You know, someone's being aggressive, someone's being toxic, that sort of thing. And ESCs can be more volitional about making sure that can happen. But at the end of the day, in their ideal world, that person can still be given the chance to participate.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's a very interesting take. I hadn't thought about the quadras in that way. I've always asked more and more questions about the quadras. It's hard to find, I guess, very definitive material that seems coherent, I suppose, because I've heard certain things about the quadras from here and then certain things from here. And then Michael Pierce's video, that was the one that I most relied on. I was like, okay, so this will be my foundation, I suppose. And then I was actually very surprised when you said that this was wrong. I was like, oh, because that's like the foundation that I've been building everything else on when it came to like quadrants. Yeah. So now it's like, well, then what exactly? It's like starting now almost from scratch. So this is helpful to now distinguish once again like how that is, because yesterday's conversation on Twitter, like, yeah, I was very like confused. I was like, oh, if this is what it means to be a beta, then yeah, like, no offense to betas, but that's not my style. Like I'm just not that type of person.
And it's amazing how one's communications with other people of different types, you can feel in that communication, hang on, their way of communicating I don't gel with.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what was confusing to me then is, once again, like, well, but I know other people who believe in socionics, who believe that they are LIE and EIE and stuff like that. And they would say that that's not exactly like how betas communicate and all of that. And so then it's like, okay, well, this group of socionics believers are saying like, no, that's inaccurate and whatever. But then this group of socionics believers are saying like, no, this is every beta ever kind of thing. And so once again, it's like, well, which one of you are telling the truth? Well, not even telling the truth, because clearly both sides believe what they believe.
Their own understandings of the truth.
Yeah.
Now, exactly. I think now this is why I am someone who supports the idea of looking at different theories and as to what makes the most sense based on the founding principles. Now, socionics has an advantage over many MBTI schools in that there is a basis. We have these things called the information dichotomies. 5 of them are quite important. The other 2, it's very hard to even define, but 5 of them at least are quite important for understanding each information element. I can run through those.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat that last part?
I mean, it lagged a bit. Sorry. I can run through the dichotomies if you like for getting, say, an understanding of introverted sensation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's start with just sensation in general first. So we say it's a perception rather than a judgment. It's irrational information. So we should think, okay, and what should be. So the idea of Hume came with this idea of you can't derive an ought from an is. They're different things. How things should be is not the same how things. So since say deals with how things are. Intuition, how things could be, but again, not an ought. External and internal. And what is external and internal? It's about whether the information is objectively shareable, or do you have to interpret it for yourself? Like, I can look to the room behind the creamy white mantle hole where the fireplace would have been. So the fact I can see that, and if you were to turn around, you'd see that, and everyone else watching can see that,
Right.
shows it's external information. It's not internal information.
Right.
Yeah. And so sensation is external. It's also involved rather than detached. We talk about sensation, that we feel sensation. We don't think about sensation. It's vivacious in our perception. So sensations, all perceptions which are external and involved. So once you got that out of the way, now what's the difference between introverted and extroverted? The first is what introverted and extroverted means in socionics. And some debate about this. I think the best way of viewing it is that one is trying to expand the quantity of the information, and the other one is trying to refine the quality of the information. So one's more. The other one is preserve the best bits, get rid of what isn't fitting in with everything else.
Got you.
Right.
Got you. Okay.
So another dichotomy is static dynamic. Static is where things are either this or this or this, so discrete states. Whereas dynamic is a continuous flow or change, more holistic. One is that everything's in clear, separate places. The other thing is a holistic overall flow. Now, introverted sensation. So you've got a refining characteristic rather than an expanding of quantity, and it's more holistic. Refining, holistic in the physical, observable realm. So from that, one would say introverted sensation is that idea of sort of like the feng shui function, you know, where when you take all these different physical details and you put them together in just the right way, it maximizes pleasure, it increases the quality of your aesthetic, how things fit together with harmony. There's no monkey wrench in the overall experience, making it ugly or cacophonous. And so introverted sensation is trying physical experience, taking out the disruptors to that experience, so that things are good quality.
Okay.
Now, if you take that and put it with extroverted ethics, which is about emotionality, you get this idea of positive, feel-good emotions, not the nasty emotions, not the ones which aren't nice to feel.
Okay. All right.
And that's why ESCs are far more, you could say, well, anodyne or feel good with their feelings. If you take the EIEs, it's the opposite. They want the profound, more world-changing, often emotions, the ones which are uncomfortable to feel, because they point to some very deep, hidden truth which they're trying to bring out.
And this is something that's a constant search for the EIEs. From my understanding, because, and this is me just once again trying to understand, because I relate to that, but if I'm understanding you correctly, it sounds like an EIE is like almost what I'm envisioning is someone who's constantly searching and looking for a reason to become upset, to become rigorous in a way, as opposed to someone who may just be living life. And then when they see injustice, when they see something that they're not okay with, then it's like, oh, that's something I have to speak out against. That's something that I will not tolerate, which that's what I would more relate to. Would you say then that, like, what does that, do I have the right interpretation of that? Is it a little bit too exaggerated?
It's a little bit off for the EIE, I'd say, because I think the main thing about EIE and SLE is that they're looking for influence and impact, to have their voice heard, to make a difference with their voice, with their influence and emotional expression. But also supporting that is a theme towards some higher, more uplifting emotionality, which is more uncomfortable, deeper, darker, as it were, outside of the form. And they do like other people providing the structure and the reason for understanding things. But when you take ESE, yeah, they're more about extroverted ethics and extroverted intuition. So really, like the ILE, they're actually pushing the ideas for new ways of looking at things. And then they're supporting the extroverted ethics, making it more about feel-good emotions. And because they're very high extroverted sensation as well, if they see something which is making the mood bad, making people, they feel, hang on, that's, people are feeling bad here, they're going to quite quickly, without hesitation, move to action. They're trying to do it in a, they're not trying to increase the laying out on the table harshness of a situation, but they do have that sort of, they often have a sort of communitarian aspect of, I got to sort this out, I got to take this upon my environment so people can be happy again.
Got you. Okay. Yeah, I guess then that makes sense. Especially like when you bring in the extroverted sensation, said it was demonstrative. That's what it would be for the Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess then that would make sense, because it seemed like, if anything, like I would be laying in the middle ground until up to that point, because it's like, and that's what I wanted to emphasize, that I'm not, despite maybe like how I am or appear, I don't really know. I mean, I have an idea of how people view me on Twitter. Despite how I might like appear, it's more, that's what I was kind of like, you know, getting to, where I'm not fearful, which you just explained with potentially demonstrative SE, if I'm an ESE in socionics. I'm not fearful to approach and to call something out. And that's why I'm saying, like, I'm not conflict averse per se, but I also wouldn't necessarily like look as if, I wouldn't view myself as the type that's seemingly looking for a reason to hop on a pedestal and say something. It's more, if something strikes me, or I peep something, then I feel like it's my duty, it's my right to like go ahead and say something about that. And I don't hesitate on doing that. What I would do is think, okay, what is the most, in my subjective opinion, effective way of bringing about change in this? Perhaps if I just go yelling at the person, hey, that's not right, don't do that, you guys should stop being racist, or whatever, then perhaps the person will stop acting or saying racist comments toward people. However, that person will still think the racist comments. And so therefore, it's, in my opinion, it's best to sit down, like, okay, tell me, why are you racist? Like, why do you hate Black people? Why do you hate white people? Why are you against these things? Because I feel like everyone has their own logic. And if you're able to understand the programming behind that person's mind, you can now go, that's where that's where the source is coming from here. And then all of a sudden, it's like I reconfigure the way they're thinking, which I'm assuming is what you mean by like presenting new perspectives. I'll reconfigure the way that they were thinking. And then by the end, I didn't necessarily have to bring like a that's bad, don't do that kind of mentality that, in my opinion, would just end up like being behavior monitoring and not necessarily cognitive change. And rather, I've been able to affect the person in a way that goes to the root. Like, oh, I'm no longer racist. I don't have to modify my behavior on acting racist toward people because inherently I'm not racist anymore. I'm not afraid of people telling me racism is bad or anything. And now I have to keep my thoughts to myself because I'm afraid that these people are going to bully me. But rather, I'm not racist at all anymore because somebody sat down with me. They explored why I'm racist. I was able to get to the root and I was able to plug that out. Does that make sense?
It does. Because that's the thing. You're coming from the way you describe it, it's the taking action part. It's the addressing the issue directly part, which you take more for granted. You can do that. That's the easy part. But what is the harder, the more interesting part? That's trying to build a dialogue, build a connection, and understand then you hadn't been exposed to before. Trying to understand what's going on in there. So that'll be the area of growth, of development for an ESC. An EIE approaches it, it's almost the opposite. They take for granted the fact they have lots of different issues, but their area of growth is getting tougher and actually getting more assertive. And actually trying to prove to people that actually they are tough and they should actually be respected for their toughness. When actually they can be quite vulnerable there.
Yeah, I guess, then that's not me.
No.
Because I feel like, and again, I just want to make it like so clear that this is not me going against, like speaking against EIE, but like personally, I never felt the need to have to almost pretend or to show that I'm tough. Even being as anger averse as I am, I know that I'm fully capable of, I have a video on my channel called My Relationship with Anger. And one of the scenes, I put like 3 various scenes in it, but I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Man of Steel. Superman? Have you seen it?
I've seen it.
Okay, yeah, I think you froze, so I wasn't able to tell. But so in Man of Steel, there was a scene, if you remember, where they were at the bar, and like clearly they don't know who Clark Kent was. So these guys, they were just, they were like throwing stuff at him and everything because he defended, like Clark Kent stepped in to defend a woman that was being groped and just being catcalled and harassed and everything. And he just said, "Hey, stop. Like, that's not okay." And then the men were like, "Oh," and then they're like trying to like tease him or whatever. And it's like they don't know that Clark Kent is Superman, fully capable of just obliterating them on sight. But rather than trying to prove how tough he was in that moment, he held back, like he kept his demeanor and he was just like, "You know what? I'm just going to go." Now, granted, and I believe that he was a 9 in that movie, he did do a passive-aggressive thing after he walked away because then they threw a beer can at him. And when one of the guys came out, he saw that his truck was like broken on a telephone.
I remember that. Yeah.
And that, wow, that's definitely me. Like, and so it's not, so like, I guess like, and I think that you also alluded to something like this on Twitter. I hadn't been able to be on because of all the stuff I was doing earlier today. But I think I saw something about like, like how yesterday I alluded to Aslan and all of that. And I wasn't trying to compare myself, by the way, to like a deity. And even with the Superman thing too, just now, like it just so happens that like those are the parts like I resonate with. Like, so it's not necessarily that I want or feel the need to prove how tough I am, because I feel like if I really wanted to, that'd be easy. Like I personally know for myself that I'm tough and that I can do this. In fact, it's because I know that I'm this way that I choose not to, because I feel like Superman, if I were to unleash that, then it would just burn several bridges. Like it would just completely just be like, wow, Denzel, you went too far with everything. And it's like, well, why instead just allow this to pass in a way? I hope that's all making sense. But yeah, that's
you're someone of a harmonious mindset who happens to have a lot of extroverted sensation there. You just don't value it for its own sake. But it's there, and you can take it for granted. And of yourself, you can rest back on your toughness when you've lost the ability to build a greater piece of understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, EIEs, well, they don't go over the passive aggressive. They think the confrontation itself is meaningful. Pursue the getting everything out on the table and that intense discussion, and they live for that intense discussion. They don't see it as a bad thing. Whereas I think ESCs, they want to create more harmony, create more understanding through gentler means, despite having the greater capacity to actually get into the bust up.
Got you. Yeah. And I guess then that very much makes sense once again, because again, like it seemed as if there was a understanding, or like it seemed as if what was trying to be told about me was that I was incapable of confronting issues when I needed to. And it's like, no, I'm very capable, but I choose the path that I choose because I would rather confront it this way. Like I would rather confront it head on in that way, or like more assertively, more aggressively, if it was absolutely, like, in my opinion, necessary. But if there's a way that I could just sit down, talk to you, why are you doing this, man? Like, why do you feel the need to bully this person? Why do you feel the need to, like, let me actually try to understand why you're doing that. Yeah. And if that doesn't work, then I can just apply force. Like, okay, you know what, to be honest, I tried to talk to you. I tried to do this. Now I'm upset. Now I start applying the force. Like, because now I don't feel bad for applying the force, because it's like, well, I gave them the chance to surrender. I gave them the chance to in a way change their ways, and they refused to. So now,
no, that seems like the right chronology. That makes more sense. And there's the thing, this is perhaps a reason for this misunderstanding initially was because the Myers-Briggs doesn't make that clear distinction between valuing something and being strong at something.
Yes.
So something is all about that distinction. That is a very important distinction for understanding the full scope of the personality type.
Got you. Okay. All right. Yeah, I guess that makes sense then. I also know that one thing that we talked about, or that you originally mentioned, was, so in socionics, from my understanding, FI is kind of like looking at, it's almost like how I explained FE in my video, where it's like understanding the nuance of interpersonal dynamics. And then I think that one thing I wanted to present to you that I wanted to further understand from your perspective was, could the difference between FE and FI be that? So like, when I see the interpersonal, like one of the videos that I'm planning on putting out eventually, I've just been doing a lot of research, is I've been studying the 8 different forms of love in the Greek language, because I believe that from what I've seen, a lot of FI users, they hop between platonic, romantic, and it just seems like black and white to them. While to me, that's the experience I've seemingly got. While for me, it's like, no, that person's not necessarily romantic right now. It's still like in the platonic area, but it's more of like a philasha kind of love, or it's more of pragma. It's more, that one's more agape, you know, that's not really eros, you know, kind of thing. And so in understanding that different, like the nuance in our ways in relationships, like how to categorize each relationship, that's where I've seen that I've been like excelling. While with my ISFP wife, for example, She's someone who like it's muddy for her. Now she kind of gets it. But like previously she'd just be like, well, then if you're that deep with that person, or if that person's that deep with that person, they must like each other. And I'm like, I don't think they necessarily like each other romantically. I just think they're very deeply into each other. Doesn't that mean liking each other? No, not necessarily. But to drive it home, one big difference that I've noticed between us is that Jamila, my wife, she's always said the phrase, this person makes me feel weird. That person makes me feel weird. This person makes me feel weird. And for me, I've always laughed at that, even before we knew, like, cognitive function theory. I was like, how can a person make you feel weird? like what? However, I realized I might observe like the same thing, but then instead I would focus on the interpersonal dynamic. And instead of saying this person made me feel weird, I'd say, ooh, that interaction was awkward. That interaction was awkward. Oh, these two are kind of like
awkward. Yes, awkwardness. Yeah. That's you know what? My fiance is terrified of awkwardness. She can't bear it. I'd say she's an SCI in socionics.
Got you. All right, I'm still learning this. So
because awkwardness, SCI, introverted sensation, extroverted ethics.
Got you.
Yeah. Now, awkwardness is very much an introverted sensation sort of assessment. It's a feeling that the communication is not flowing. It's not a high quality communication. There are stops and starts, trying to find something to say that's stressful. It's not pleasant. So SEI can be very perceptive of awkwardness in conversations and trying to avoid that. They need to, for ASCs, they're more willing to go in and make the conversation go to get out of the awkwardness because they've got a bit more toughness. The SEIs, they feel it's getting uncomfortable. They can even hang back to get to know people to go into conversation with.
That's so interesting because I tend to find in the Myers-Briggs terminology, I tend to find SFJs and NTPs to often be very awkward at times. And so I guess, that would be like a difference then in the systems and how like SI is defined and all of that. Because I've witnessed, in fact, my wife and I both agree that ISFJs, which again, now I agree with you, like it's not always equal to SEI. It's not always equal to SEI. ISFJs in the Myers-Briggs system, me and my wife both agree, like they're usually the most awkward people.
One thing I'd say to that is that from going on to BAPT, British Association for Psychological Types, where I met Heidi actually, when I encountered someone who was a very clear SDI, they typed themselves ISFP in the Myers-Briggs, not ISFJ.
That's very interesting.
These are proper practitioners, people who've been in it for decades.
I'm writing that down. Yeah, that's something to really look into. But yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's actually what I had thought could be maybe a distinction between FE and FI, and how just going back to what we were talking about in the beginning, where when I read that originally about socionics, this is how FI views things, I was like, huh. And I asked my wife, I'm like, do you see things in this way? She's like, not really. But now I'm seeing how okay, no, she does. Cause for example, she has a list, she's always trying to get me to make lists of my friends from the closest friend to the least closest friend kind of thing. And I don't think to do that. Yeah. But my relationship with all of them are different. However, I do have them in subcategories where it's these are the most intimate friends, not in any specific order, versus these are my acquaintances, these are strangers, these are that. And there's like there's like an overlying kind of like overview of like how the connections are between them. So I'm more focused on the connection itself and the interactions themselves, while she's more focused on how the interactions affect her. And that's what I found fascinating. Yeah. So I just
more of an extrovert, an introverted approach in general, really. But one thing I look into that in terms of introverted ethics and extroverted ethics is where it's very useful to understand the dynamic static dichotomy. Because the idea of introverted ethics, it's about an attitude, a single thing. And for attitude to be different, it has to have changed to something else. Whereas when it comes to extroverted ethics, it's about emotions, about the emotional energy. That's far more holistic if you think about it. It's far less clearly defined. So an attitude is, I don't like this person. Oh, no, I could work with this person. Oh, I actually really want to be close to this person and have intimacy with them. And that's quite set and doesn't easily change. When it comes, in fact, changing it can be slightly traumatic if someone no longer acts like they have a relationship close as meant to have been. It's about how you're feeling. And if you feel like running up to and hugging someone, great. If you feel like shouting at someone, if you are less introvert sensation oriented, yeah, that also is great. And it's that mood and it's the feeling of it overall. It doesn't necessarily individual quality of their character, whether you feel a particular attitude towards them and that character. And an ESC or EIE would be introverted ethics ignoring. They won't pay so much attention to it.
Makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so then it is for sure then that, okay, well, actually, I probably at this point, going off of the knowledge that we've just, I guess, went back and forth on, I don't think that I would relate to EIE. I will definitely like read more about the ESE. And if anything, I have you on Twitter now. So it's like, because I do want, like, I know that with, for example, like Enneagram, I just like learned about what my type was this year. And there were things that like back when I thought that I was a 2, I kind of was like, I don't really relate to that, but this type can't like, this stuff can't like actually like fit you completely, whatever. But when I learned that I was a 9, then I was like, oh, no, everything seems to really, really fit like very well. And after I looked into it, and so I guess for the same thing here, of course, I'm going to go and look into ESE on my own. And what I would like to know is like, okay, this is like the true fit for me. And that would mean asking questions about like, okay, this part does not fit. Why does it fit kind of thing? More from like just a genuinely curious mindset as opposed to like just being resistant and difficult. That's just, I guess my disclaimer for, as I go and look more into that. And would you say, just in case if ESE is not, and I haven't been looking at the live comments, I'll probably do that after I'm done with this sentence, but like, so anybody can also chime in, but like if ESE is not by chance the type that I am in socionics, like what 2 runner-ups would you recommend that I look into based off of our conversation?
I think it's adjacent on the benefit cycle. These types can often look like the particular type if you squint at them. So the adjacent on the benefit cycle for ESC would be IEE, as example. And the other one would be SLE, but I don't think you should look at SLE. I wouldn't say so. I think if the things we focused on already and established have been more the IEE, ESE sharing side rather than the side. So that would be my runner-up if ESE doesn't work. And again, when you look at ENFJs, the 3 types they're likely to be are EIE, ESE, IEE. types.
So
The
the ENFJs are most likely to be.
I'd say are most likely to be EIEs and IEEs.
Got you. All right. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I think then I have all of my notes and where I would definitely look to. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm glad I could help, DZ, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
I want to very quickly look for some of these comments to see if any questions here.
Finally opening them.
Yeah. So Wetware says, so in an EIE, how does their FE interact with their SI? So basically, it's FE without any SI. It's a point of failure. It's a vulnerable function for them. So you'll see FE with a notable lack of a sort of groundedness, easygoingness, that flow. It can be quite sharp, comfortable. Yeah. What else is here? Let's see. Actually, some examples. I've had EIEs I've approached, and because they're just a little bit. Sorry, I can't answer this right now. Something's like, oh my goodness gracious. You know, it's like there's no flow from assertive to calm. It's like suddenly there, and an unstable energy level, and that's one way you can often tell with LIEs and EIEs, that lack of no regard for the flow of the current conversation and the current environment. Let's see, what else? Is anything else here? Oh yeah, Kat's on here. I'm gonna do a talk with Kat doing an Enneagram, which will be fun. I think some people are coming around to you being ESC, Denzel.
Yeah, I'm seeing. Yeah, I mean, so far it seems to fit. Like, and I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna read the profile and everything before I like really stand on it. But yeah, it seems to fit, and you've answered a lot of the questions.
Great.
From what I've asked. Yeah.
Oh, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, Denzel.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for watching as well. Take care.
For sure.